thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us, and we are really excited to have this session where we are going to be talking about resource mobilization. As you're all aware, this is part of the continuation of the leadership program for the top 100 young African conservation leaders. Let me take this opportunity to first congratulate all of you for the good work that you're doing, and also for your recognition as the first team on this list. It's really great to see that a lot of us young people are passionate and have decided to take action to conserve our environment. So it's really commendable, the work that you're doing. And we hope that with this session, you're going to have some increased skills and enhanced skills that will enable you to take your initiatives a little further. So today we'll have an expert sharing with us some insights into fundraising, and particularly on environmental fundraising for environmental conservation. Our guests for today is none other than Madam Rubina James. Rubina, please say hi before.
Hello. Hello, bonjour, everyone. How are you?
Thank you. So that is our guest for today. And Rubina is a seasoned professional with 29 years of multi-sector leadership and management experience in humanitarian and development contexts in Africa. So she's an African from the beautiful country of the Seychelles. Her experience lies in partner relations and resource mobilization, program and policy development, program management and people development, as well as institutional capacity building. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and is a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. In her stellar career, Rubina has worked in various capacities for the European Humanitarian Office, United Nations Development Program, Interpeace, and the main connection with us today is that she at one point also served as the regional director for the World Organization of the Scout Movement Africa region. So as the Scouts, we are also really proud of the work that she did during her time with the Scouts, but also that she continues to carry on the Scouting principles even in her other areas of work. She's also worked for for WWF actually. So again, brings her even closer to the work that we are all doing. And she's also worked for the United Nations Office for Project Support and the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. But since 2019, she's the head of resource mobilization at the Center for International Forestry Research. And that's World Agroforestry. So thank you, Rubina, for accepting to share with us your knowledge and your experience in this area. You've clearly worked in environment and have quite some interesting, have held interesting positions that are not just connected to environment, but to young people as well. So we're really looking forward to a great session. And my name is Nelson Opany. I'm the manager for communications and partnerships at the World Scout Bureau Africa Support Center here in Nairobi. And I'll be moderating the session for today. Just some housekeeping, please keep your microphones muted so that we avoid interruptions. We are recording this session, so it's also going to be made available to you thereafter. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome our expert for today, Madam Rubina. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nelson. Thank you very much. First of all, just wanted to say bonjour and congratulations again to all you conservation leaders. I understand that your work has been very impressive, so I'm looking forward to this. And this is a real honor for me to have been invited to talk to you. We have an hour, maybe slightly more, depending on your schedules. So I'm going to keep my side of the presentation as short as possible so that we can facilitate questions, answers, and discussion after my presentation. And I promise it's very short. Nelson, could we have the PowerPoint, please? The slides.
Yes, I'm having it that up. And just again, for your information, we have the French translation interpretation ongoing. So please, if you want to follow this in French, go to the bottom of your screen, click where we have languages and select French. Our friend Ezra is supporting us with that interpretation. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, wonderful. Well, all right. I think that this is just sort of your title page, so we can jump into the next slide, please. All right, I'm not going to read off this, but essentially the important thing is here, and I think you all know this, so I'm preaching to the converted, that fundraising is your powerhouse. Essentially, it is a critical component that supports all the activities that you're trying to do and achieve all your objectives. So without the required resources, which is what fundraising is there to do, you're going to have a real tough time sort of taking forward or expanding the kind of work that you are trying to do. Next slide, please. And again, as I said, I'm keeping it really short, so effectively this is the last of my slides. If we want to look at resource mobilization, there are effectively simplistically 3 building blocks for effective resource mobilization and partnership development. Your resource partners, your strategic partners, your creative communication and outreach, and then through all of this, stewardship of your partners. Basically, resource partners are those partners that are going to provide you money. Your strategic partners are going to be your stakeholders, your beneficiaries, government, other CSOs and NGOs and youth organizations that you're working with that are not necessarily going to be providing you money, but providing you strategic support for the kind of work you do. Creative communications and outreach, self-explanatory. Bottom line is if people don't know what you're doing, they're not going to be able to fund you or not be aware of what it is you're trying to achieve. So effectively, if you looked at this as sort of your very basic platform on which to build your resource mobilization efforts, we're keeping it simple and we can get into any details or I can answer any questions you have about this. But essentially what I've put in the middle here with stewardship, this means your effective management and taking care of your partners, whether they're resource or strategic, and stewarding your communications and outreach to make sure that your impact is being shown, what you're saying is credible, and so this is, as I said at the beginning. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the effectively that's the end of my slide presentation. What I'm going to get into here, and again, I hope it will generate some sort of discussion. But bottom line is, as Nelson had pointed out earlier, I've been doing this for 29 years in one way, shape, or form. And the bottom line is that your fundamentals, and I think that this is really critical, is that you need to be platforming your resource mobilization, in fact, all the work that you're doing, on the fundamentals of credibility, accountability, impact, and more importantly, integrity. And then, of course, all of this has to be structured. Do you have a strategic plan in place? Do you have an operational plan in place? Have you developed a work plan for both yourselves and maybe the other people that you're working with, or for your strategic partners, as I mentioned to you before? Then, of course, you have to look at financial accountability, because at the end of the day, approaching donors for money is one thing. The question is, are you able to account for it, provide reporting for it, which leads into the whole what I mentioned earlier on the fundamentals of accountability. And of course, integrity, because at the end of the day, you want to make absolutely sure that you are spending the money that donors are giving you with respect for the money they're giving you, but not only that, that you are able to show impact, report on the finances they're giving you, which leads into the whole issue of credibility, which is what donors look for and what you should expect in yourselves also. Now, so that's basically you're looking at then your structure. Importantly, one element that folks don't really think about a lot is what is your absorption capacity. So for example, if you have an initiative that is running $10,000 a year or $20,000 a year, and a donor comes up and wants to give you $100,000, well, that might seem very attractive, and essentially that's what we all want. Do you have the capacity to spend or absorb that $100,000? You don't want to find yourself in a situation where a donor gives you money. It's wonderful to get that kind of money, but your organization or your initiative does not have the capacity to absorb the $100,000. Because then this again impacts on the integrity of the work you're trying to do and your credibility as an organization, because once you go back to a partner and constantly are telling them that you haven't spent the money or you haven't achieved the objectives of what the money was given to you for, that is going to impact negatively on your ability to get money from them in the future and frustrate you and people around you. So that is a really important thing you need to look at. How much money can I actually absorb? What are my financial systems in order for me to absorb that money? So for example, and I don't know if I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of the wonderful institution of M-Pesa in Kenya. So for example, if your fundraising efforts are using M-Pesa as a vehicle to get money, to mobilize resources, then you have to realize also how you report back on the M-Pesa. How are you going to go back to the donor and report back on your M-Pesa earnings? So these are all the questions that you need to ask yourself. Are you using a bank account? What are the issues with the bank account? What are your tax obligations or other obligations that you would need in country? Again, going back to the whole issue of accountability and credibility. So when I talk about structure, and structure tends to be boring because I know you're all passionate about what you do, you have to consider that when you're fundraising, this is what partners are looking for. Your resource partners are looking for credible organizations that are accountable, can show impact, and do this with integrity and respect for people and our surroundings. That, I think, is the basis of what I can say to you. You're looking at two kinds of fundraising. You're looking at fundraising, which is solicited, which means you're getting on the websites or you're getting on donor sites and you're looking at what they're putting out in terms of expressions of interests or requests for proposals. That is very different from the other kind of resource mobilization, which is unsolicited. In this, which is more difficult, but has major advantages, you are actually negotiating with a donor based on proposals or concept notes that you have actually created, taking it out to targeted donors or a donor that may show interest, in which case this is a very sort of bilateral type of resource mobilization versus unsolicited, which is highly competitive and highly unpredictable, because bear in mind, you're applying for funding as are hundreds, if not thousands, of other organizations. So whilst you might think that you have a really excellent shot and an excellent project or program, and you can show everything I mentioned before, your impact, your communication strategy, your structure, you're going to be faced with competition from a variety of other organizations. So you can't really rely on that money, especially in the beginning. But I certainly say you must look into solicited funding, because solicited funding also then gives you an idea of, number one, your proposal writing skills, because sometimes donors will have templates that you use. It will help you also understand the whole budgeting process, because whilst you may not have to submit a budget in the initial stages of solicited funding, it will become something the donor will ask for later. So I certainly think, and there's lots and lots of websites, obviously I can't mention any names here, but you can get online and look at, funding for conservation, biodiversity, environment in Africa, and literally there'll be thousands that come up. But, pay strict attention to what you're looking at, who you're getting the money from. Pay strict attention to what the donors are asking you for in the submission of your solicitation documents. Because you don't want a situation where you've worked really hard and produced an absolutely wonderful 10-page proposal, and it is rejected because in the initial rules, they asked for 3 pages. And trust me, that has happened. So if you are going to pursue unsolicited funding online by looking at donor websites, looking at some of the vehicles through which a lot of these opportunities are presented, just make sure you're paying strict attention to the criteria that the donors are asking for. We've had, many instances where obviously a wonderful opportunity will be presented on a donor website, and we'll be absolutely thrilled and very excited. We definitely want to apply for this money. And then we'll realize that it's not applicable to any of the countries we work in, or is not applicable to any of the activities that we do. So there again, please pay attention to not only what you're trying to achieve, but look at the donor priorities and how you align with what you're trying to achieve with their priorities. That's specifically and in a nutshell for solicited funding. Now, unsolicited funding, and I'm sure a lot of you have done this, is where you have reached out to partners. They're very interested in the work you're doing, and they say, give us a proposal. Now, this is when, going back, and again, what I'd said to you in terms of your structure, do you have the capacity to write these proposals? Are you working? Do you have a full-time job? And this is something you're passionate about. So you have to consider your resources. Do I have the skill sets to write a proposal, to be able to effectively communicate what we want from this partner? There again, you look at your resources and your structure. Now, once you've written the proposal, you have to budget that proposal. And at the end of the day, what is really critical here, saying that you do wonderful work, and I'm sure you all do wonderful work, is great and needs to be expressed in your proposal. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty of writing your budget, you have to take into consideration you are asking for funding for a period of time, and in that period of time, what kind of resources do you need and where? Do you need, for example, to hire a consultant? Do you need to get an accountant? Do you need a car? Do you need inputs like this? And all these things have to be detailed in your budget, because at the end of the day, if you're fortunate enough that the donor gets excited about your proposal, you are going to have to then produce financial and narrative reports back to that donor in the time frames that they're asking. Some donors will ask for reports on a quarterly basis. Some donors will ask for reports on an annual basis, and you need to be prepared to provide those reports through, for example, having effectively monitored and evaluated your program or project over the duration of the funding, so that when you go back to the donor and you show that you have achieved what the donor and you have discussed, and you can exhibit impact. This is the kind of things that have to go into your proposal and your reports, so that when you go back to that donor or other donors, you are able to enhance the possibility of your getting continued funding from them or enhanced funding from them. So this is essentially, I just wanted to say this in a nutshell, but I'm going to conclude my presentation with a really significant event that took place at a fundraising seminar, much like this, where we had the most wonderful people, young people that came up, and they were all looking for ideas and how to do resource mobilization for projects that they were wonderfully, really keen and dedicated to and passionate about. So everyone's sitting in the room, and we've got an expert panel. And so one of my colleagues on the panel, one of the panelists, got up and said, he picked out 3 people from the audience. And he goes, I'm going to ask you each to give, you've got 1 minute to tell the rest of the audience what it is that you do, and see whether or not the rest of the audience will be willing to fund you. Of the 3 people that presented, one young lady was so incredibly passionate about what she did that the entire audience raised their hand and said, absolutely, they would be willing to give her, $10. The panelist who had asked the question in the first place turns to her and says, what is your M-Pesa number? And she didn't have one. So at the end of this day, this wonderful pitch, everyone excited, everybody keen to give her money, and she hadn't thought about the vehicle through which she would accept the money. So when I say this, it may not sound like it's something you want to do, because I know that you're passionate about what you want to do and you want to get the voice out there and get everybody surrounded. But please make sure that what you have put together on the fundamentals of resource mobilization with your resource partners and your strategic partners and your communications and outreach, you have put those structures in place to accept money, to absorb the money, and to report on the money. So that concludes my resource mobilization in a nutshell. And so I turn it over to you to ask any questions. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rubina. That was short and clear, but I am sure that from what you've said, you've elicited a couple of questions and reactions. And as you are presenting, I posted on the chat that if anybody has a question, please type it in, and then we are going to shoot that them to Rubina. And so far, I see we have two questions. So
Okay,
I'll
go
start with
ahead.
the first one. This is from Dodo Moke. Dodo asks, when writing a case statement, what is the most important question that should be answered?
All right. Do we want to? You want to give me the second question, or do you want me to answer them individually?
I can give you the second one so that you take the
Okay.
two of them together. The second
Yeah.
one is from Stephen Aina. Stephen asks, how possible is it to cut down on the huge reliance on external funding? Are there tested or experimental strategies to source financial support within country or around the project location?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Nelson. Dodo, first thing, let me go back. It's a great question. So let me just say, you're writing your case statement. You've got to go back to what put you in this situation in the first place. Why did I get involved in this activity? What was it that I saw that I thought needed to change? What was it that I saw that needed improvement, that needed focus, that needed the spotlight? And what is it that I'm going to do to effect those changes, to put the spotlight on that? That is your case statement. You have to think about your theory of change. What have I seen? What do I think I can do? What skill sets do I bring to the table to effect that change? And what impact is that change going to have? Now, these are the sort of compelling stories, and you don't have to be this huge professional who's worked for 29 years to do this. The important thing is that you get your message across, you've made your case statement, you've got backup, you are able to effectively illustrate the impact you have. And again, I'll go back to what I said about your strategic partners. Who have you spoken to? It's not just your idea. You've spoken to people who will benefit from what you're trying to do, partners who will be able to support you. You get all that information and you're putting it in your case statement. This is the challenge that I have seen, or that we have seen. These are the things that we believe, the competence that we believe will affect change or improve that situation. These are the strategic partners we've spoken to and are partnering with to ensure the success of what we're trying to do. And effectively, it's you put together a compelling case where you are able to show that what you are doing has an impact and has the buy-in from the people or constituencies that you're trying to support or trying to enable to or trying to empower. That's your answer, Dodo. And of course, I'm still available. Stephen, absolutely. Look, I think one of the really important things are that, we are so focused on this sort of tradition of aid, which has been, we go to the northern countries and the northern countries give us money. But let's not forget, if you look, for example, on the Forbes top 30 African entrepreneurs, these are all folks your age. They have raised money themselves in their own countries. We have incredible philanthropies in Africa. There's a list of names I can give you. And this is all information that is so available on the internet. There's Dangote Trust. There's so many others. I'm just naming one. Of course. And I think personally that absolutely you want to engage local partners, that they are so convinced that what you're doing that they're willing to contribute. So definitely, when I talk about solicited and unsolicited funding, you are still going to have to produce a concept note or some sort of idea to donor, no matter where they may be. Because at the end of the day, people who are going to give you money are going to want to see a level of credibility and accountability. But do I think that you should approach Southern donors? Absolutely 100%. And again, though, the bottom line is no one is going to give resources to people just because we're in Africa and we're Africans and they're Africans. We go back to the issue of what theory of change you have, what sort of impact you have, and why they should give you the money. There again, pay attention to who you are approaching, because while there are incredible philanthropies, for example, over here in Nairobi, we've got a lot of really stunning high net worth individuals. but they have very specific sectors that they give money to. So you're not going to try to approach a donor in Nairobi or anywhere else that's really not an environmental or conservation donor. But at the same time, you've also got the ability, and especially now post-COVID, where you are able to show that nature, biodiversity, environmental protection has a direct impact on human health. So suddenly you're making that link between human health, conservation, and other sectors. Because as you can well imagine right now, a lot of donors, whether it's private or public donors, are investing heavily in health. But therefore right now for conservation, for environmental issues, climate change, the rest of these things have taken on a much greater meaning because people have been affected hugely and globally by just having sort of thought of conservation or climate change as something that somebody else would take care of. I absolutely think that we need to start local. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rubina. We have a comment from Toini saying, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and around resource mobilization. This is really resourceful. And Toini goes ahead and asks a question. How do I approach local donors or organizations to fund my project or event? I know you've talked about that, but maybe you may want to clarify.
Absolutely. Look,
Yes.
I'd like you to think about this. There again, I am successful at approaching donors, and the approach is also important. Do you call them? So you're researching your donor. So I'm going to jump into an example. You research your donor. You realize that the donor is, funding, I don't know, conservation work or something, is willing to give money to young African leaders, and you think, I've got a great idea and I want to approach this person. You start off with the basics. You write letters. You write emails. You try to get connections either through their own offices, your network, how anybody in your network that can help you approach this person. But if we're going to start from absolute scratch, you want to put your idea in a concept note and submit it to that donor through whatever means that you can get to them. And of course, this is maintaining a level of respect also. You don't want to inundate the donor with millions of phone calls or hundreds of emails. The bottom line is to maintain not only the respect for your partner, but very appropriate protocols to approach partners. So if you're going to go talk to the CEO of a very big private sector company, you're going to follow those protocols. You're going to go through that person's office. You're going to follow the protocols, even in addressing them. Don't shy away because you might not have that big a network. The internet is so absolutely wonderful, but let me go back to what I said to you earlier. This is why you need to be talking to strategic partners, because bear in mind this, if you don't know how to approach that donor, they might. They may have already got a connection with that donor. So you're reaching out to strategic partners to help you approach resource partners is important. But there again, following the protocols, the maintenance of respect and discipline, writing to, communicating with, and looking for ways through your own networks and other people or other organizations that might help you get to that partner is very important. Over.
Thank you. So we got another question from Joy. Joy asks, how can we ensure resource sustainability after a funding cycle has ended?
Okay.
Joy, that is... Or building, sorry, it's two-part question. Sure. Or building safety nets for unpredicted events like the COVID-19 pandemic. So she's just trying to relate to how, for example, how COVID pandemic has affected financial sustainability and what can people do to cushion themselves against such situations. Okay.
Absolutely. Joy, great question. Super wonderful question. I'm a firm believer, and let me just say this, I'm answering your question in kind of a roundabout way, but you'll see where I'm going. What is your exit strategy? So when I ask you this, so you've got this wonderful, marvelous project, and you think, my goodness, if I had the right amount of money, and I had the right kind of support, and I need 5 years of funding, and after this 5 years, that's what I'm going to have achieved. So the question is, in that 5 years, what are you building? Capacity of your stakeholders, capacity of beneficiaries, so that you're not completely and always dependent on that donor or the resources coming from outside. Because if, for example, your product says, I'm going to come up with a new feedstock for cattle in my country. Now, it'll take you 5 years to research it. It'll take 5 years for you to build things up. But in those 5 years, you also have to be looking at how you become independent. Are you going to try to gain some profit out of this? How do I just generate the resources? Because this, remember, is not just getting money from a donor or a partner to help you start up, but you're also looking at building the capacity of the people around you and your own capacity to make this an financially independent structure. So I always say, what is your exit strategy? Are you looking at you're going to need money for the rest of time, for 20 years, for 30 years? And if not, what is it that you're doing during the duration of your project to build the capacity for you to become self-sustaining?
Vous êtes dans le processus de développer votre stratégie. Donc, comment est-ce que vous allez aider votre communauté et qu'est-ce que votre communauté est en train de
benefits from activities refuses to provide any funding. So that's this kind of scanning of the horizon that you're doing during the course of your project, where you're looking at resources that you need to allocate or you need to be allocated to your project that are independent of your original donor. So I would strongly suggest that, and also be realistic. Now, you do not hesitate to ask a partner for 5 to 10 years of funding, even if you think you could probably accomplish this, in less than 5 years. It's always better to be on the safe side than on the sorry side at the end of the day. But I go back again to what I'd said earlier about absorption. COVID. Now, I think that all of us have realized, certainly in one way, shape, or form, all of us have been affected by this. It certainly has thrown a lot of people off. You can imagine in your countries, on our continent, the financial losses that have been occurred by this. I think these cushions that you ask about, there are some cushions, obviously, you take for granted, which you put in your contingency reserve, where you say to a partner, this is my budget for my project, but I'm going to add in 10, 15% for those catalytic events or those things that we didn't expect. In the case of COVID, this has thrown us off completely. But interestingly enough, it's given us the opportunity to approach donors in a very, very different way, where it's not top down. You are now able to speak of the variety, socioeconomic, environmental effects of COVID, and that you're telling that what you're trying to do can actually enable recovery from COVID, however small that contribution may be. Bear in mind, you're going to have incredibly wonderful things happening, but then there are going to be unexpected things always in the course of your project. You could have something catalytic happen. So for example, you start your project, you have a very clear objective, and suddenly while you're doing this project, you see something completely different happening. That's a catalytic opportunity that changes the direction of where your project is going. But at the same time, you've got your finger on the pulse of what is happening. You have the finger on the pulse of your beneficiaries, of your program, what it's accomplishing. So bearing that in mind, you want to make sure that inbuilt into this project, inbuilt into your change theory, you are looking at how this can become self-sustaining through the kind of funding, whether it's financial or in-kind funding, that this project has convinced its beneficiaries to contribute to. Over.
Thank you once again, very insightful. Next question is from Michael. Michael says, good presentation for sure. How can we direct our requests, in quote, proposals in a specific domain? So I guess maybe what Michael is trying to ask here is, once you have the proposal, how do you get it out to the prospective donors?
Absolutely, Michael. Super wonderful. I mean, like I said to you before, you can write the most beautiful proposals. If nobody knows, you're not going to get funding. Let me just go back to an example without mentioning the name of the site I'm talking about. It would be very interesting for you to teach yourself, gain knowledge, if you will. Get onto a website and say, type in, for example, funding for NGOs in Africa. You'll see a whole bunch of opportunities that will come up. Now, what happens is, this is what I talked to you about when I said solicited funding. In the solicited funding, the donor will tell you, and they will have a very specific presentation. They will tell you exactly what it is they're looking for. They'll tell you the format, et cetera, and you submit your proposals online. As I said, though, with the proviso that this is pretty competitive and is also unpredictable. But if, for example, we go to unsolicited funding, where you've got an absolutely brilliant idea, and this relates to a question from one of our colleagues earlier. You've got a brilliant idea, and you think to yourself, I'd really like to go and sit down and talk to somebody. What is your communications and outreach program? Are you using your strategic partners to talk about the great work you're doing? Are you using those networks to actually inform to the wider audience, you need to be funding this project? This project is absolutely essential, because essentially, you don't want a situation where, unless invited, and that's always wonderful, you're absolutely right. How do I approach a donor? But again, do your research. You may find that on a donor website that they're saying, okay, by the 10th of August, we want a one-pager from this kind of organization, and this is the format it needs to come in, and it goes to sort of a general mailbox of that donor or that funder, and they, of course, will make the selection at the end of the day. Solicited funding. If, for example, you find out that you've got an absolutely incredible philanthropist in your country that is giving money to credible programs, they will also have on their websites or through their offices the means through which those approaches need to be made. Now, if you're fortunate enough that you're walking along the street one day and you actually get to meet somebody over a cup of tea in a coffee room that's working for an organization, reach out to them. The important thing is, if you believe in what you're doing and you know that what you're doing is making a change, spell those convincing, make sure you're telling as many people as you can about the work that you're doing. Get the phone numbers. Again, like I say, following the protocols. You don't want to be harassing people. Bottom line is, there are approaches that you will either find on websites of donors, or through your strategic partner networks, or through the networks that you create yourself by describing what it is you try to do. Fora like this is absolutely essential, because you've got a chance now. You have 99 other conservation leaders that share your experiences. Reach out to them, get knowledge from them, talk to each other. Because at the end of the day, folks, we're not islands on our own. It's wonderful that there's 100 of you out there that have been selected for this incredible program. Help each other. Talk to each other, share lessons learned. And I'm sure that the conveners of this have considered this, obviously, and how you can write proposals. So you need to make sure that you don't just walk away from this incredible training without having reached out and shared your networks and shared your contacts and your great ideas with each other. Because at the end of the day, we're all heading in the same direction. Let's make sure we're helping each other get there. Over.
Indeed, let's make sure we are helping each other get there. And Libratha commented on your inputs around COVID-19 being an opportunity for us to, rather reach out to donors differently. And she says, this happened yesterday to our company with our donor in the UK. She just asked, don't put yourself at risk if COVID-19 is still there. And she asked, how are you going to work with the money in this time? She just needed to hear our strategies. So she's actually affirming that you're very right that donors, or rather unexpected situations, will require us to readapt our strategies in terms of how we utilize resources from donors.
Absolutely, but Nelson, let me. That's really exciting that you say that. Because here's the thing. I think, let's not forget, donors have been giving money to organizations for decades. Surely in those decades, we've learned how to spend that money. We've learned things. I think this is a golden opportunity for us now to help our donors. Because this situation has put all of us, whether donor or recipient, into the most unbelievable of situations. We have got wealth of experience. You're young folks out there. COVID could be with us for a while. It has changed the dynamic of work, certainly in my 29 years. I'm learning how to rework. Use those experiences, use those success stories, use those innovative ideas that you have that work, and go back to your donors and say, you know, we tried this and it's worked beautifully. But again, and I congratulate your partner for having said this, please be safe. I mean, I would absolutely not want to be sitting here and say, go out there and find something brilliant while putting yourself, your staff, your colleagues in any risk at all. But at the same time, folks, bear in mind, this is the first time this has happened to us and our world. If you are finding things that you think, my goodness, this works, share it, please. Because knowledge lost is probably one of the worst crimes in the world. And I think, again, we're all in this together. With COVID, young, old, youth, old people, let's look at your innovative ideas. Let's look at those things that you will know are tried and tested, or that you want to try because you believe it works, and share it with your donors. Because I think at this time, I think we do owe them the lessons we've learned and knowledge and evidence that we might be able to give them help others. Over.
Thank you very much, Rubina. Those are really nice words to hear. And as we were going on, one of us has been sort of helping, my colleague Calista has been helping to capture some of these inputs. And as we go towards the end, he's going to give us a recap.
Excellent.
And maybe I have one last question here. Someone asked, and this is not from this chat, but from some of the questions we received earlier, is that if I want to write a resource mobilization strategy, what should it contain? How do I structure this? Because ultimately, from all these discussions, we would expect that the participants will use this information to sort of organize the way they do their fundraising. So
Sure.
as a heads up, what would you respond to this?
Okay, and there again, in a nutshell, right? Bottom line is, if you're writing a resource mobilization strategy, your strategy is to do what? Your strategy is to, and I'm just giving you examples. So our strategy is going to have, we want to increase or expand our donor base. We want to triple our annual financial intakes. We want to, so what are the objectives of your strategy? So when you're thinking about this, so say, for example, you look at, obviously you want to increase or expand your donor base. So that is, one of the kind of fundamentals of a resource mobilization strategy. Then how are you going to do that? So at the end of the day, your strategy kind of gives you a direction of where it is you want to go and is aligned with your program strategy. Because there's no point coming up with a wonderful resource mobilization strategy that's got no alignment at all to your program strategy. So what is your program strategy trying to achieve? If your program strategy is very clear in its objectives, then your resource mobilization strategy has to be aligned to create or to enable or to gain the resources in order for your program strategy to be able to be delivered. And if that means that you're going to have to go out there, number one, and multiply your resource base, you have to look then at the kind of resource bases that is available, that is accessible, and that you have some level of predictability with. You have to look at how much money your program strategy is going to cost, and therefore how your resource mobilization strategy is going to be aligned to achieving that financial objective of your overall program strategy. So for example, if you are not quite there yet, you don't have a huge big program strategy, you certainly have a concept, an idea of what it is you're trying to achieve, and you've budgeted it, i.e. you've costed it. So here's what I want to do, and if this is what I want to achieve, how much is it going to cost me to achieve this, and over what duration? So your strategy, again, is aligned to your program strategy and the activities that you intend to achieve, and you've costed those activities. Therefore, your strategy has to look at what you need to do to raise the money in order to deliver on the objectives of what you've set out to do. Over.
Thank you. Wow, that has been quite a lot, and you are justified to take a sip of water.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Joy says, thank you very much, Rubina Nelson. This is very insightful. And ideally, that's the reason why we are doing this, because as Rubina says, we share something in common, and that's the passion for conservation. So all the lessons and the ideas and the experiences that we can share to help each other to progress is really essential, and that's the purpose for this session.
Yeah.
Daniel Sitole. Daniel asks, good afternoon. Anyone to help me with the ecosystem restoration template plan? Daniel, I'm not really sure what exactly you're looking for when you talk about ecosystem restoration template, but I don't know whether Rubina can comment on that.
Well, Daniel, to tell you the truth, there again, you live in such a wonderful generation that you just type in a couple of words. Look on the internet to start with. This is what I would recommend. The variety of templates, and then of course you look at templates for nonprofits. You try and type in as much as you can to make it narrow it down as much as possible. I guarantee you will find an ecosystem restoration template online. But then again, let me also say, you have 99 people in this leadership program that probably would be able to give you something that they've either developed or are developing. Work together, because it would be super wonderful if you guys can use that passion and use what you've done and share experiences. But otherwise, I always defer to the internet when I'm really trying to sort of look for something specific. And then I will pick and choose. I will cherry pick from ideas, because some templates are super wonderful and some templates are not. So you want to make sure that you researched a bunch of templates, because what you want to make sure in your template, or what you're trying to do, is that you're being able to show your impact, the budget for what you're trying to do, the kind of resources you're going to need, and of course, at the end of the day, your stakeholders and how this project or program is going to come to fruition. But bottom line is, like I said about everything before, use your networks, use the internet, because there's so much available to you right now. Over.
Thank you. Indeed, there's so much available. And the other thing I would recommend, Daniel, is that there's a group, there's an online a platform where all of you are. Maybe we can pick that as a question for discussion on that platform as well. And let's see what other people can contribute to the same.
Absolutely.
And yes, go on.
I'm sorry, Nelson, what I wanted to say, I would recommend that you look at your local chapters of fundraising associations of fundraisers. I know that they go from the global to the regional to the local. They are really exciting fora, because you will meet a bunch of people in there from different sectors who are trying to do what you want. And some of them are really dynamic, because they meet on a very regular basis. If you're not a member, find out what your association and your local chapters are, and I strongly recommend membership of those institutions. Over.
Thank you, Rubina. And just the last question, I see we have 5 minutes to time. The last question before I request my colleague Callisto to give us a recap is there's an interesting comment on the chat from Ramina. Ramina says, hello everyone. I am a young environmentalist from Kenya. I'm 15 years old.
Wonderful.
So Rubina, my question to you is, she's not asked a question, but just from her comment, is for a young person the age of Ramina, what kind of fundraising ideas would you suggest? Because for it's different from people who are a little grown up a bit, but for young people, school going age, the dynamics change a bit, because there's issues of parental consent, there are issues of legal age and all that. So what would be your comment?
Absolutely. Rubina, let me say, first of all, I cannot thank you enough for being such a young and, I mean, God bless you for that. 2 words for you: Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg is not some grown-up person, certainly not a person with white hair like me. Passion, dedication. You're in school, so you already have a structure that you have to consider. Start a club in your school. Get your teachers engaged. Tell your teachers what it is that you're trying to do. Engage your students. Greta Thunberg stood outside the Swedish parliament for months on a bicycle and started a global movement. I can't stress enough how important it is. And look at the recognition she's got. But what I will say, more importantly, Ramin, and I think this is really critical, do it safely. Please don't just get on the internet and start, searching for things and talking to people you might not know. Use the structure of your school or your church or your whatever social bodies you have or you're members of, or your mosque or your temple or whatever. Use your community in a safe environment to tell them what it is you're trying to do, to get their buy-in, and through those institutions and those grown-ups, start looking for solicited funding or for funding from them. Because at the same time, please don't look at your age, please, as something of a negative. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And quite frankly, if I had a 15-year-old that came into my office with a really compelling idea, I would do everything in my power to make sure that this person meets the right people to take these ideas forward. Because this kind of passion is what the world lacked. And this is why we're in the situation we are now, because folks my age kept saying, you guys are too young to do anything. You're never too young. And you've done more for us with your passion and dedication than most people my age have done their whole lives. Bravo, bravo, bravo. Over.
Indeed, bravo. Bravo, bravo, bravo. Not just to Ramina, but to all of you for the amazing work that
Absolutely.
you're doing. And I sincerely hope that the insights shared by Rubina have been useful and will at least help you get a step ahead in terms of finding the resources that you need to get your project going. So let me call in my colleague Callisto to give us a wrap up of some of the really interesting and insightful ideas that have come through, and then we shall close our session.
Excellent.
Callisto, over.
Thank you, Nelson. And thank you also to Rubina. That's been amazing. And I think I enjoyed your session most. All right, so I'll just highlight some of the things I've picked as you are going along. So I'll start with from the presentation that you gave, and I picked on the building blocks, because those are the 3 main things that one should look out for: the resource partners that you should have in your project, then the strategic partners, and the creative and communication and the outreach that you do, just talking and let people know what you are doing. So that's really important. And the common thing in all of them, the stewardship part of it. So that's really important. And just to go briefly to the rest of the things that I've captured is the credibility that is needed, credibility, integrity, and accountability for you, for anyone that is looking out for donor funding. Of course, if someone gives you money, they'll need you to be accountable and, effectively implement whatever course you want to implement and report about it. So it's also important to have the absorption capacity for you to ask for funding. Then it's also important to follow donor funding requirements and criteria. If you are applying for funding, those are listed and the criteria is well outlined. So it's important to follow what is asked of you. Then do not concentrate on yourself. Just ask yourself, what are the priorities of the donor? What is the donor looking for in this particular funding that they're able to give? And it's important that all of us sharpen our proposal writing skills and the budgeting skills. Every single day, we have a room to learn. So make sure through research and even the internet that we have, improve our proposal writing skills. And also, you must have a vehicle through which to accept the funding, absorb, and report. Yeah, we know, for example, when you are having startups and you are a young organization, not well established, and you apply for funding, but you don't even have a bank account to receive the funds, something like that. So as we do all that we do, make sure that you have the capacity to receive the funding, absorb it well, and report about it. And then the focus on the why and how when writing a case statement. So this was based on the question that was asked when you're writing the case statement, and theory of change. So focus on why, the objective, and why you want to do whatever you want to do. The other key thing is align your fundraising with the strategic and operational plan. So don't forget that if you doing any kind of fundraising, make sure you align it with your strategic and operational plan. And key tip today, if you want to start fundraising for your cause, start at the local level. You know, those people around you, that's where you are supposed to start. And then make links. This was in the case of the current pandemic and what we are experiencing now. So even with the current health pandemic, and your project is on environment, make sure you find a way to connect the two, because these are two areas and probably priorities could be different, but you can find a way to connect and make sure it's relevant to the funding that you are applying. Also research about your donors and understand them. So after that, establish connections that you need, and respect the donors' protocols. You know, I love this. Don't go around ambushing people. You're asking for funds, but you're still also ambushing them and harassing them around. So just respect the protocols that they have. Another key thing is also use your strategic partners and networks, and also your networks to talk about your work. You know, tell as many people as possible about your project that you're doing. And this then goes to, if you were to write a resource mobilization strategy, then align it to the program strategy, the objectives, and the activities that you've costed. And that will make you come up with a very brilliant strategy in general. And then we go to the children and the young people, and you're still in school, or so. I love that, Rubina. You know, start from school, the church, and involve your parents, the other pupils in school, or students, or the teachers. Involve them in whatever you are doing. And, you know, the basic thing today and in the environment that we live in all these things that we do, don't put yourself at risk. You know, don't put yourself at risk. That's the bottom line today. Be safe, and thank you, Nelson.
Brilliant, Callisto. Thank you very much. I see you've also been following the presentation, and it will be nice to share some of those things that you've captured, you know, with the participants as well. And as we said, the session has also been recorded, so you'll also be able to get the recording as well. So we are coming to the end of our session, and let me just invite Rubina for a last word, and then I'll make one announcement, and then we'll call it a day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nelson. Callisto, well captured, well captured. I couldn't have done it better myself. Look, folks, you know, let me just say, you know, when I said to you when we started this out, that it is a great honor for me to be having been invited to speak to you. I really mean that genuinely, because to tell you the truth, we're counting on you now, your generation, to affect the change in this world to make it a better place. You know, unfortunately, as you've seen, you know, we older generation maybe didn't do such a great job. You've got the chance to make that change. you've got a chance to make this world and the people that live in it and the animals that live in it have a better life, leaving this place, leaving this earth a better place. So let me just say, not for you to thank me, but for me to thank you for participating in this, for being willing to take an hour out of your lives to listen to me. And I just want to say, go for it, maintain that passion, and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rubina. And we share in that pride to have been involved in delivering this session to amazing young people who have demonstrated passion and commitment to our environment. That's really commendable, and we continue to encourage you to keep up with the work that you're doing.
Absolutely.
And for me, from a communication perspective, I would just like to add one thing. And it's connected with one of the items that Rubina talked about and Calista has also highlighted, is that if people do not know you, they'll probably not fund you.
Exactly. Yeah,
so
well
invest a lot in telling the story of what you're doing, whether it's writing blog posts, whether it's your social media channels, whether you're putting up a website, or even connecting with mainstream media to get your story out. Please do it. Please do it, because it helps to build a reputation. It helps to build some evidence of the work that you're doing, so that even when you get to that point of writing a proposal, you have something to show that I've been in the game for this time and this is what I've done. So please invest in your communication as well. And for sure, it's going to change the way people look at you. It's going to change the way people are able to even find you, and open doors for more funding. So for the last thing of today, and this is your assignment, from the lessons learned in today's presentation, please draft a resource mobilization strategy, and that you can use to take forward your project or your initiative that you're running. And note that this is something that you'll continue building upon, because we have another session coming up next weekend on the 24th. And Michael, please.
Yes.
Michael, please mute your microphone. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Yes, so please begin to put together a resource mobilization strategy based on the lessons that you've learned, but also from your own experiences, because again, your realities have a very big determinant in the strategies that you employ to actually reach out to people to mobilize resources. So please start trying to put together something. And with Callisto, I think in the next session, we can find some time to maybe showcase one or two, so that we help each other to build upon that.
Very good idea.
So, thank you very much, and wishing you a nice weekend, and see you next Saturday for our panel discussion.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Lawrence, can you stop the recording?